But afterwards, there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis, in like manner, disappeared in the depths of the sea. Plato. Atlantis, a mysterious island nation mentioned in Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, has been an object of fascination among Western philosophers and historians for nearly 2,400 years. Plato described it as a powerful and advanced kingdom that sank in a night and a day into the ocean around 9600 BC. The legend of Atlantis has been the subject of many debates over the centuries, but what is it that makes it so interesting and special? Atlantis is described as an ancient advanced civilization which lived on an island or a separate continent somewhere near modern Greece. According to the legend, the entire continent sank in only one day, within 24 hours, and took all its secrets of advanced technology along with it. How did the legend of Atlantis come into being? Plato describes Atlantis as an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, located in the Atlantic just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, generally assumed to mean the Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato, the lost city of Atlantis had the distinctive shape of a circular central island surrounded by concentric rings of land and sea, enclosing each other like cartwheels. Its culture was advanced, and it had a constitution suspiciously similar to the one outlined in Plato's Republic. It was protected by the god Poseidon, who made his son Atlas king and namesake of the island and the ocean that surrounded it. As the Atlanteans grew powerful, their ethics declined. Their armies eventually conquered Africa as far as Egypt and Europe as far as Tyrrhenia or Etruscan Italy, before being driven back by an Athenian-led alliance. Later, by way of divine punishment, the island was beset by earthquakes and floods and sank into a muddy sea. This great naval power of the ancient world, this utopian empire, mysteriously sank in one day, as Plato states. Only the legend of this advanced civilization society remains, and centuries later, many archaeologists believe in the story of Atlantis and actively search for its remains. Apart from Plato's work, Atlantis was never mentioned in any other ancient texts. The true location of Atlantis was never discovered, nor were the remains of the city ever found. However, it cannot be denied that many remains of other ancient civilizations have been found under the sea. It is not unusual that the cities of these civilizations were found near the coast, and the fact they were submerged explains the great rise in sea levels after the Ice Age. Plato's Critias says he heard the story of Atlantis from his grandfather, who heard it from the Athenian statesman Solon, who learned it from an Egyptian priest who said it happened 9,000 years before that. The writings of Plato gave rise to an entire literature on Atlantis. Thousands of books have been written on this topic, translated into almost all languages of the world, but the number of articles and essays is impossible to estimate. Never before, perhaps in the history of mankind, a historical text of 24 pages has caused such a stream of interpretations and arrangements as the works of Plato. The idea that Atlantis actually existed and that it was more than just a legend came to life in the 19th century. In 1882, in his book Atlantis, The World Before the Flood, writer Ignatius Donnelly relaunched this discussion by writing about the successes of the Old World. He states that certain achievements of the ancient civilization, such as language, metallurgy, and agriculture, could not have occurred without relying on some previous advanced civilization, since the ancient folk wouldn't have been able to develop so quickly and successfully. Assuming the Atlantic Ocean was only a few hundred meters deep at the time, Donnelly described the continent as being submerged by the movement of ocean waters in the same place where Plato also claimed it was located. After almost 2 centuries, this theory still has its supporters. Encouraged by Donnelly's theory, many writers later went on making their assumptions about what could have happened to this mysterious place. The most famous discovery associated with Atlantis is that of Dr. Raymond Brown in 1970. He found the remains of a civilization near the Bahamas by accident while looking for sunken ships. With his research team, he was able to witness a city with roads, domes, and pyramids. The most interesting thing he found was located in one of the pyramids. It was a pedestal with bronze arms holding a crystal. He managed to transport the crystal so it could be investigated further, while the rest of his crew collected several metal objects that have remained unidentified to this day. It was later discovered that the crystal was made of flint and had 3 pyramidal shapes in its center. It has only been shown to the public on 5 occasions. Dr. Brown was the only one left alive after this expedition, while the other 4 divers who were with him died while diving in the Bermuda Triangle, not that far from the location. Another theory is that Atlantis is actually a version of what Antarctica is today. This theory is based on the work of Charles Hapgood, whose book named Moving the Earth's Crust from 1958 was prefaced by Albert Einstein. According to Hapgood, about 12,000 years ago, the Earth's crust displaced the continent that is today Antarctica much further north. This sudden transition doomed the civilization living there at the time, and its city remained trapped under layers of ice. His work appeared before we properly understood the movement of tectonic plates, which put this theory on the verge of being nothing but a legend. One of the latest theories about Atlantis refers to a civilization that thrived on the Greek islands of Crete and Tyre, now Santorini, and was named after King Minos between 2500 and 1600 BC. It is believed that this was the first great civilization in Europe to be adorned with magnificent palaces, and that the first Europeans to use the written language lived there. However, while at the height of his power, Minos disappeared from history in a mysterious way that sparked the belief that there was a connection between this civilization and Plato's Atlantis. Historians believed that around 1600 BC, a massive earthquake hit the volcanic island of Tyre, causing an eruption of millions of tons of rock, ash, and gas. Tsunamis followed the eruption and would have been strong enough to wipe out entire cities across that region. Strong earthquakes, especially those with their epicenters in the ocean floor, can trigger a tsunami. A typical example of such a catastrophe was the tsunami resulting from the eruption of Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia in 1883, when the height of the tsunami wave reached about 40 meters. Such waves are quite capable of causing the coastal belt of the mainland or even entire islands collapse. In addition to the theory that a tsunami swept the Atlantis, the strong earthquake hypothesis is also very popular. Throughout history, there have been cases of Earth's surface suddenly collapsing as a result of this natural disaster, such as, for example, the destruction of the pirate capital Port Royal in Jamaica in 1692, when this city was submerged 15 meters into the sea. The myth of Atlantis has tickled the imaginations of many generations. The story of a lost civilization is widely used by many writers, and there are many scientists and researchers still trying to determine what really lies behind the story told by Plato. According to the author of the dialogue, he narrated a family tradition, the source of which was the prominent Athenian statesman Solon, Plato's ancestor who lived 2 centuries before him from 640 to 559 BC. This respected Athenian traveled to Egypt, where he was pleasantly received by the priests of the goddess Neith, who is associated with Pallas Athena, the patroness of Solon's hometown in Greek mythology. According to the Egyptian priests, civilizations are mortal. Many of them died as a result of the great fires emanating from the stars straying from their paths. Others perish when the gods, creating purification over the earth, flooded with waters. In Egypt, however, there are temples that have never been threatened by the flames of fires or the waters of floods, and they've preserved records in which all the wonderful earthly events are captured. Egyptian priests, guardians of a tradition of antiquity that was far superior to Hellenic, told the Greek sage about the power of a civilization that had sunk into oblivion, and at the time enlightened him about some pages in the history of his own ancestors. Plato claimed that the events reported by the Egyptians took place 9,000 years before Solon's visit. Most mainstream historians, philosophers, and scientists have come to the conclusion that this legendary island is only part of Plato's fiction. According to this theory, Atlantis is just a vision of an ideal society, a story of gods punishing pridefulness. There is no other written information about this island other than Plato's dialogues, which leads to this conclusion. Also, despite modern advances in oceanography and mapping, no trace of a sunken civilization has ever been found. To make a parallel, 3,000 years ago, the ancient Greek poet Homer told the story of the ill-fated city of Troy and the great Trojan War in his powerful epic, the Iliad. This mythical tale of love and war has captured imaginations ever since, while some have argued that the myth of Troy was just that, a myth. The allure of the story has led many to search for the site that, according to Homer's poem, was one of the most important settlements of its time. When Heinrich Schliemann started looking for Troy, many people laughed at, but eventually he found Troy. The only thing that could put an end to the lengthy debates about whether Atlantis is just a myth, a legend, or whether it actually existed at some point would be the discovery of the remains of Atlantis in the sea or on the ocean floor. But would that even be possible after all this time? Scientists from numerous countries are constantly exploring the seas and oceans, finding valuable archaeological discoveries from time to time. To this date, however, nothing that would prove the existence of Atlantis has been found. But, given the constant improvement of the technical equipment used for such expeditions, future discoveries may not be so far ahead. Another question that arises is, what could scientists actually find at the ocean floor? The main building materials of antiquity were marble, granite, basalt, and sandstone. After several thousand years in seawater, most of the buildings would have completely dissolved, except for some marble edifice. In salty seawater, metals undergo accelerated corrosion. iron oxidizes after 200 years in the sea, while copper and copper alloys disappear in 400 years. If objects made of copper are large, such as bells, cannons, and anchors, for example, a layer of carbonate that could somewhat protect the object is formed on the surface. On the other hand, high-quality gold can remain preserved in the water for a long time. Wooden objects can sometimes disappear in a few centuries, while high-quality ceramics can lie at the ocean bottom for thousands of years. In general, some of the Atlantis legacy would theoretically be capable of surviving to this day. Maybe a miracle happens after all, and humanity gets a new perspective on its history. However, despite the efforts of authors like Donnelly and others to gather and link archaeological, geological, and mythological evidence in support of the legend of Atlantis, there is still no scientific evidence for its existence. There are no undoubted remnants of its culture and inhabitants. The myths and legends of the past, along with the story of Plato, live in the memories of people from an ancient era. However, that does not mean that the facts that would prove its existence will never be found. But for now, Atlantis remains a myth. What about the other side of the story? Is there scientific evidence that Atlantis never existed? Of course, the strongest argument against Atlantis is the lack of clear evidence of its existence. Most geologists agree with uniformitarianism, the doctrine suggesting that Earth's geologic processes acted in the same manner and with essentially the same intensity in the past as they do presently, and thus such uniformity is sufficient to account for all geologic change. They do not believe that some of the recent events that could lead to the sinking of a continent have occurred in the historically recent past, say the last 10 or 20,000 years. There is evidence of certain probably sharp climate shifts in the interval from 11 to 13,000 years ago, but authoritative scientists do not agree on associating them with shifts in the Earth's surface. A unified perspective was well expressed by Elizabeth Chesley Beatty in her interesting book America Before Man. Referring to the legend of Atlantis, she says, "It is not surprising that so little satisfactory evidence has been found, because Atlantis, if it existed at all, disappeared long before human memory could confirm it. At the normal speed of the Earth's crust, it would take 1,000,000 years for such a large island to sink into the depths of the sea." It is quite difficult to indicate the exact location of the lost Atlantis. There are many hypotheses about where the flooded state may be. Plato wrote that a huge island was once in the ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, beyond Gibraltar. But his searches in the area of the Canary, Azores, and British Isles have led nowhere. Some researchers suggest looking for the remains of the material culture of the Atlanteans in the Black Sea, linking the flooding of the island with the Black Sea flood that occurred 7 to 8 millennia ago. Then the sea level rose in less than a year, according to various estimates, from 10 to 80 meters. There is a hypothesis that Antarctica is the lost Atlantis. Scientists who adhere to this theory believe that Antarctica in ancient times was shifted to the South Pole due to a lithospheric shift, or a sharp displacement of the Earth's axis as a result of the collision of our planet with a large cosmic body. There is also an opinion that traces of Atlantis can be found in South America or Brazil, but most interpreters of Plato's dialogues are sure the lost island should be sought only in the Atlantic Ocean. In recent decades, the fallen state has sought out many expeditions, most of which returned empty-handed. True, from time to time the whole world is agitated by news about the found traces of the flooded island. A recent research conducted by the US-led research team proposed a new location for the lost city of Atlantis, the legendary metropolis believed swamped by a tsunami thousands of years ago in mud flats in southern Spain. In particular, the location they indicate is in the area north of the city of Cadiz in Andalusia, centered on the Donaina National Park. The team of archaeologists and geologists in 2009 and 10 used a combination of deep ground radar, digital mapping, and underwater technology to survey the site. It's the power of tsunamis, and it's just so hard to understand that it can wipe out 60 miles inland, and that's pretty much what we're talking about, said researcher Richard Friend, a professor at the University of Hartford who led an international team searching for the true site of Atlantis. Friend and his team analyzed satellite imagery of a suspected submerged city just north of Cádiz, Spain. There, buried in the vast marshlands of the Doñana Park, they believe that they pinpointed the ancient city of Atlantis. Friend's discovery of central Spain of a strange series of memorial cities built in Atlantis' image by its refugees after the city's likely destruction by a tsunami gave researchers added proof and confidence. According to Friend, Atlantean residents who did not die in the tsunami fled inland and built new cities there. While it's hard to know with certainty that the site in Spain is Atlantis, Friend said the twist of finding the memorial cities makes him confident Atlantis was buried in the mud flats. Experts plan further evacuations at the site where they believe Atlantis is located and at the mysterious cities in central Spain 150 miles away to more closely study geological formations and to date artifacts. A dispute about whether a mysterious island once existed or the ancient Greek thinker simply invented it continues to this day. Various theories are born and die. Conjectures appear and disappear. Some of them are surrounded by science, while others are more like a beautiful fairy tale. Perhaps our children or grandchildren will solve the riddle of Atlantis. But it may turn out that another 2,000 years will pass and the secret of the lost island will remain unsolved, and our descendants, as well as we today, will be tormented by conjectures and assumptions. Thank you for watching, and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. We really hope you subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified of future releases, just hit the bell button. Leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of this and what topics you'd like to explore in our future videos.